everyone, I'm Gayle Dunnigan of SSNN, and this is Galactalk. My guest tonight is one of the most notorious criminals in the settled systems. His ruthlessness and desire for wealth has landed him squarely at the top of the wanted list for every major law enforcement agency in the galaxy. I am, of course, speaking of the self-appointed leader of the Crimson Fleet himself, Jasper Kryx. Good evening, Mr. Kryx.
Good evening, Gayle. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
Yes, well, being blindfolded and then grav-jumped to what appears to be an abandoned mining facility isn't exactly what I'd call an invitation.
Well, I'm sure you're not surprised that your request for an interview would come with some very specific conditions.
Frankly, I was a bit surprised to receive any type of response at all. Would you mind telling me why you decided to do this interview?
Because there comes a time in every pirate's life where they have to make an extremely important decision. Do they take a leap and become one of the most legendary pirates in history? Or do they simply sputter on, subsisting on freighters and deep space privateers?
So are we to assume that you are taking the leap? That Jasper Kryx is moving on to bigger and better things in his life?
That's spot on, Gayle. That's exactly why you're here.
Interesting. Well then, would you mind sharing with us exactly what your particular leap entails?
In due time. There's no rush. In fact, I'd say we have at least 12 hours before the authorities trace this broadcast. Plenty of time to discuss whatever you like.
Oh, all right then. Perhaps the best place to start this interview would be at the beginning of your career.
Please, proceed.
Where did your stellar rise to infamy begin?
In the streets of New Atlantis. No parents, no godparents. Just a homeless punk kid robbing whoever he could for the credits.
Were these violent crimes? Murders?
I'm a bit offended you even asked that question, Gayle. Sure, a few people here and there walked away with injuries, but I'm not some kind of butcher.
That doesn't sound as heartless as your reputation would imply.
Well, like I said, I was just a kid.
Were you ever caught by the authorities in New Atlantis?
Oh, dozens of times. But I'd just give them a fake name, or they just slap me on the wrist and send me on my way. They obviously didn't think that I'd amount to anything and didn't want to waste their time with rehabilitation.
What changed that? Was it the robbery in 2218?
2218? Oh, yeah. The Galbank archives. Very good, Gayle. I see you've done your research. That would be when I rounded up a few of my buddies and we knocked the place over. Made off with a ton of credits. My first big score.
Is that why the Crimson Scar decided to bring you into their ranks?
That's right. They brought me in, taught me the ropes, and I did crimes for them for 5 years, till I decided I wanted more. I got rid of their leader, put myself in his place, and started running the show. I've been the one in charge ever since.
Was it absolutely necessary to cut his throat and leave the body on a public street in the well?
On the street, reputation is everything. I wanted everyone in the city to know that Jasper Kryx was taking over. I think they got the message.
So tell us about Jasper Kryx's version of the Crimson Scar.
All I can tell you is that under my guidance, the Crimson Scar became more influential than every other syndicate combined. Here I was, 22 years old, and I had power, people that followed my orders, and an endless stream of credits. Gayle, I have to tell you, I was having the time of my life.
So you'd consider extortion, robbery, burglary, kidnapping, assault, and murder to be positive life influences?
No. I'd consider them as just means to an end. Those so-called crimes were merely stepping stones until I had enough wealth to buy the Crimson Scar a few spacecraft.
Yes, let's talk about that. It appears you weren't satisfied with terrorizing New Atlantis alone.
Oh, I've never stopped reaching, Gayle. The amount of money we were making in New Atlantis was decent, but the really big scores were in space, on the cargo ships. We're talking millions of credits, maybe more. Who the hell could count it all?
Most people assume this is when the UC decided to actively set up a task force to pursue the Crimson Scar.
That's correct. Those idiots in charge of the United Colonies were clearly embarrassed that they had allowed the Crimson Scar to make the jump into space. They sent ships after us. Lots of ships. I almost think that they enjoy starting wars.
Perhaps this was the first time you had finally reached too far.
You could say that. I count my time running the Crimson Scar as a learning experience. I wouldn't say I reached too far. I'd say I reached too fast. Didn't cover all my bases. Made some stupid mistakes. One thing's for certain, though. When I was finally arrested and thrown into the lock, I had plenty to think about.
Tell us about your arrest.
Oh, my arrest was spectacular. Definitely one for the record books. UC Security sent an armada after our little fleet of ships and picked us off one by one until the remainder of us made it to the wheel.
For our listeners' benefit, that was the star station in orbit around Voli that you destroyed just before your arrest, correct?
You see, that's what they'd have you believe, but the truth is much less sinister. There was a firefight on the wheel when they tried to bring us in. We holed up, but UC Security unleashed hell. The damage they caused was catastrophic. We only surrendered so we wouldn't die when the station exploded.
Well, the UC says you set demolition charges to try and cover your tracks and make your escape.
That's their story. You'll have to go with your gut on what you think really happened. Anyway, they took us in and tossed us into the lock. That lovely resort they opened on Suvorov.
And you were imprisoned there for how long?
Well, it was supposed to be for life, Gayle. But I ended up serving 2 years before I decided I'd had enough.
Is there any particular reason that you started the riots that eventually led to the worst prison break in United Colonies history?
Yes. I'm quite proud of that, actually. I honestly didn't think it would go as well as it did. As for the reason, well, it's simple. The UC were treating us like animals. The conditions in the lock were ridiculously bad and no one cared. That's why they stuck us on that ice ball in the first place. Out of sight, out of mind.
Your escape caused the deaths of many that were stationed at the lock. Some would brand that as a bit dismissive for what you're describing as a protest. If you were simply advocating for your fellow inmates, why didn't you just go through the proper channels?
And what the hell was I supposed to do? Send a strongly worded letter to my duly appointed representative? Wake up. The UC only responds to actions, not words. In my mind, there was no other choice. You know what? Let's move past my time at the lock so we can get to the point of this goddamned interview.
Certainly. Let's talk about something else. How did the Crimson Scar become the Crimson Fleet?
After I busted out of the lock, I decided to take things to the next level. I had the key, a few UC ships, and a couple dozen ex-cons at my side. But I needed more, so I sent out the call. Once word got around, it didn't take long for freelance pirates from every corner of the settled systems to show up.
And this is how the Crimson Fleet was born.
Exactly. The key became our base of operations. We spent months reinforcing our position there, making it nearly impossible to approach.
what was the UC's response to the situation?
First of all, UC security gave up and handed the reins over to the big guns, the UC Navy. The Navy in turn sent ships to attack the Key. I'd say there have been 3 major attacks over the last few years. And as you can tell by the fact we're having this interview, all the attacks were embarrassing failures.
Do you feel these embarrassing failures led them to form UC SysDef?
Absolutely. They've clearly given up and decided to shove the responsibility onto a separate division. That way, in the public eye, the UC Navy can move forward, proud and strong, while UC SysDef continually takes all the blame. It's all about PR spin for them, Gayle. That's how the UC operates. Kinda disgusting, don't you think?
Sounds a bit like you're trying to deflect attention off the atrocities the Crimson Fleet commits on a daily basis.
Atrocities, huh? How about fighting the Freestar Collective over a bunch of rocks hanging in space? How about thousands of people dying while a bunch of pencil-pushing bastards sit in a cushy office and draw lines on a star map? Maybe the United Colonies should stop the bullshit and take a hard look in the mirror to see who the monsters really are.
Tell us what the future holds for the Crimson Fleet.
Changes are coming, Gayle. Huge changes. Crimson Fleet will soon be a much bigger player in this little game between the members of the settled systems.
That's quite a bold statement. Would you care to elaborate?
Well, let's just say that I'm on the brink of a score so large, it makes everything else pale in comparison. Beyond that, you'll just have to wait and see.
If you aren't willing to discuss the details, why grant SSNN this interview?
Simple. I refuse to allow the UC to spin or bury the story, making it sound like they're in complete control of the situation. I'm gonna tell you right now, they aren't.
Why does the Crimson Fleet need to make this mysterious move that you're being so evasive about?
I know SysDef instructed you to draw this meeting out as long as possible. So let me sum this up. I intend to make sure that the Crimson Fleet becomes the United Colonies' worst nightmare. And nothing, I mean nothing in this universe, will stop me from achieving that goal.
There are those that would disagree with you and claim this interview is grandstanding, or worse, a recruitment tool. After all, SSNN reaches every corner of the settled systems, and your aspirations could inspire the directionless to turn to the fleet.
You and the sheep that listen to your garbage can believe whatever the hell you want. If you were so worried about what I had to say, you wouldn't have allowed yourself to be brought here.
Let me just ask you one final question before we wrap up.
Fine. Go ahead.
When is enough going to be enough? How many credits does Jasper Kryx need until he's satisfied?
I should have expected you to ask such a stupid question. How the hell could you ever understand? You with your fancy education and your sheltered upbringing and your cushy media job. Me, I came from nothing. Everything I own, I've literally drawn blood to gain.
There's no need to get personal. I'm simply trying to state the facts so that our listeners can make judgments of their own.
Lady, I got news for you. Half of your listeners think I'm a hero. The other half are scared out of their goddamn minds, and they should be.
Perhaps we should talk about something else.
No, that's it. We're done. Can you guys get her the hell out of here? Make sure she takes all this sound equipment with her.
Well, that's it then. Thank you for your...
Actually, before you go, Gayle, there's one more thing I would like to say.
Yes, of course. What is it?
When you broadcast this interview on SSNN, I want you to remember that I'll be listening. If you edit even one word or manipulate my voice to change anything I've said, I will hunt you down and kill you
I understand. You have my word.